Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 12, Episode 116. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here on this Monday, Steelers Nation, as the NFL Draft creeps closer. But Dave, I was told we were getting Pittsburgh Maulers USFL action this weekend. We did not. The game was delayed due to weather last night. It'll be rescheduled and played tonight. And so will you watch any of the Maulers action? Catch the fever is the slogan I've dubbed up.
Yeah. Look, I was kind of geared up over the weekend to kind of watch some of this, and actually did watch a couple games, but I was really kind of interested to watch the Maulers game on Sunday night, and all in front of the TV, ready to go. And that says that the game was going to be first it says the game was going to be kind of delayed a little bit because of weather, and then didn't take too much longer for it to get postponed. So I've seen kind of the initial numbers that are being floated out there as far as viewership and along those lines, and I guess people are pretty impressed by those overall. But man, not the thing that you want to have happen, I don't think, in the first weekend of play for the USFL, because you had a couple of games kind of off to slow starts or delayed, I think, because of the weather in Birmingham. And then obviously you had the one, the capper, if you will, on Easter night, when probably, you're competing against really, I guess, only the basketball game that was going on at that time. And you try to make a good initial showing there. And I don't think that's ideal. And, things that we've talked about, you and I, over the years with some of these other leagues that have started up and fallen by the wayside, is you got to have, I think, good quarterback play. And so far, I have not seen that at all. In fact, yesterday, for one of the teams, who was it? The Michigan team, I think, had Paxton Lynch in that game. And I think he came out of that game with he split time with the other starter there. I forget the kid's name of the first overall pick, but Paxton Lynch came out of that game with something like a 1.6 quarterback rating overall. So not great. And you just look at the quarterback play it off. It seems like if you don't have a mobile quarterback in that league, I think you're going to be hurting for sure. And just overall, once again, the thing that stuck out was, now in their defense, they've only had 3 weeks to practice, overall. And I think that shows, and I think logistics is playing hell with them as well. But man, the quarterback play wasn't great. And, usually the first week is probably the highest point when it comes to ratings. We'll see here. But that's a long answer for saying I will tune in later tonight, and they play the Tampa Bay team, and that team's obviously coached by Todd Haley. So I guess a little bit of a storyline there, but I will try to give it a go tonight.
Yeah, and Tampa Bay is, as you would expect, coached by Haley, full of ex-Pittsburgh Steelers. Trying to think of all the guys on there: Eli Rogers, I think Travis Feeney. There's several other names that I can't remember right now. So people watch the Maulers and probably become fans of Tampa Bay instead of watching that game set for 7 p.m., by the way. Yeah, the Maulers, with Paxton Lynch, it's a great reminder about first-round quarterbacks. You go from Lynch being a great quarterback at Memphis to being the face of the franchise for Denver, to failing there, to trying to catch on to Pittsburgh, to posting a 1-point whatever quarterback rating in the USFL. So just a skeptical reminder of how quarterbacks don't always work out.
Right. And who was the first? Was it Shea Patterson? Is that the name?
Yeah, Shea Patterson.
Jeff Fisher's, I think, the coach of that, head coach of that team. And, after about 1.5 series or whatever it was, you'll yank Shea Patterson and put Paxton Lynch in, and Paxton obviously couldn't do it. Already playing, quarterback back and forth there. And once again, I think you're going to see the team with kind of the most mobile quarterback potentially come out of this thing there, because overall the quarterback play hasn't been great, and there's a lot of miscommunication, as you would expect with the offensive line, and people are probably already tired of this portion of the podcast of us talking about USFL. But I mean, it doesn't take much for me to at least tune in to give some of these leagues a chance and all. But man, I kind of wonder if they're going to get a full season in, because look, even you're 2 weeks away from having to compete for the whole weekend with the NFL and their draft. How's that? How's the broadcast viewership going to be on that weekend there? So interesting to see how it pans out, but I will definitely watch tonight.
And my terrible take today is an old man rant about the USFL. So you can hear me just rant and complain and whine like a big baby about the USFL and something that they're doing with their game right now. So yeah, Maulers Bandits tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Also tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern time, Dave and I will have our live stream. Or no, is it 7? No, it's 7 o'clock. I'm sorry, 7. It's also 7 o'clock. You think I would know the times of our own events?
Yeah,
but
we're not afraid to go up against USFL.
Yeah, we'll take them on. That was our stance. We're coming for you guys. 7 to 8 p.m. tonight. Also, Dave and I will have our Steelers live stream over my YouTube channel, so you can come out and hang out with us and talk Steelers before the draft and ask us whatever's on your mind.
Absolutely. And, I was thinking back to the old World League, and at least with the World League, you kind of felt kind of connected to one, because teams would allocate NFL teams would allocate players as if it was a minor league situation to it there. And, you felt like you had some sort of vested team interest in it and all. And I doubt we'll ever see anything maybe like that in the near future. But to some degree, maybe the World League was a little bit ahead of its time at that point there. But obviously you don't have anything like that right now with the NFL. So once again, it'll be interesting to see if the USFL is able to survive this, and if they don't, man, you got the XFL right on the heels of that, right?
Yeah, they're going to come back February of next year, 2023, with Heinz Ward, Rod Woodson being head coaches, 2 of the 8. And we don't know teams, we don't know rosters, but everyone's trying to get the spring league working. No one's been able to get it to stick, but we'll see what the USFL can do.
Right.
Not a lot of news here, Dave, over the weekend, predictably. Officially, NFL Network's Ian Rappaport noting that Malik Willis is going to come in for a pre-draft visit with Pittsburgh on Wednesday, April 20th. That had already been reported weeks ago, so that's not new information, but it is just confirmation of it. So, unfortunately, as we mentioned, I think last week, never heard more about pre-draft visitors aside from the initial wave of names. We got about half of the list, and so probably won't know any additional names coming in for visits.
Yeah, I would like to think that maybe at least a few more would leak in for us. I've been trying to pay attention to some of the names that I would think that the Steelers might consider bringing in on Instagram, to see any of those kids, post a selfie with, labeled to Pittsburgh or something along those lines. But I really, other than Matt Corral a couple of days ago, last week, that's the last that I've seen of that. And man, I was really looking forward to this portion of the process, because not only for now in this year's draft, but when you look back, I use it quite a bit during the off seasons to think of players maybe that the Steelers might have interest in free agency, if those players lasted 4 years and played out their rookie contract. Because as we've seen time and time again, the Steelers generally have no problem going back to that list of players that they know quite a bit about, from the pre-draft process there. So I guess they're trying to keep it under wraps there prior to COVID and all like that. I know, Bob Labriola was good about releasing names that have come in the building, but that obviously has not been the case this go around, and it's looking like we're not going to be able to build a full list of 30 here, or even close to it.
Yeah, so we do know half the list are largely quarterbacks, some linebackers, some safeties coming in. That seems to be the central theme. But without the other half of the list, it's hard to really make any, sweeping conclusions about what that list tells us.
Yeah, you would think there'd be some wide receivers in, right?
You would think, yeah. There's not been a lot of urgency shown in terms of adding to the receiver room that's been gutted. Now, there weren't extreme talent lost. I mean, Juju's the biggest loss, but you can deal with his loss. You can deal with the loss of McLeod and obviously James Washington. But the receiver room is looking really thin depth-wise right now.
And you think maybe a cornerback or two would be brought in, and I don't know, maybe a running back. But yeah, I mean, we'll just have to going to keep our fingers crossed here and hope maybe some of these names leak out this next week.
Yeah. Do want to mention one thing that Mathieu wrote over the weekend, and this is a comment from the Athletics' Ed Bouchette, everybody's favorite, that. And this is kind of piggybacking off of something that Jerry Dulac had speculated about, and this is all speculation, and this is not hard and fast reporting, but Bouchette theorizes that the betting favorites to be the next Steelers GM to replace Kevin Colbert are out-of-house hires, whether that's Andy Weidel of the Eagles and John Wojciechowski of the Packers, both Pittsburgh guys who were with the team very early in their professional NFL front office careers. And so, I don't want to say those things certainly can happen because you interview 16 guys, 14 of them out of house. Odds tell you certainly that's possible. But could this team really draft a quarterback in the first round, a face of the franchise, and then bring in a new GM and say, hey, man, hope you like him. That's your guy. That's what you're going to be tied to.
Yeah, it seems like just speculation at this point. I don't, unless they've got some sort of insider information in this, and I really kind of doubt with something like this that they would. But I mean, we'll see. I mean, I wouldn't be too happy if I'm Brandon Hunt and Omar Khan at that point, and one of those two, unless they have some sort of split duties, isn't going to be overly happy anyway there. So I remain on the side of the fence of if I was to bet on this, of it being Brandon Hunt or Omar Khan. But, we shall see.
Yeah, we shall. I mean, it is worth pointing, the Steelers' current figureheads were out-of-house hires, Mike Tomlin, Kevin Colbert, when a lot of people thought the team would stay internal with Tomlin, and Colbert, a Pittsburgh native who came out-of-house. So I understand the dot connecting there. My belief, it's still Brandon Hunt, but, I'm not going to guarantee anything, and we'll see what the finalist list is, assuming we know it, which I believe we will after the draft.
Yeah, I'm guessing we're at least about around 3 weeks away now from knowing, 2.5, 3 weeks or so?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the exact timeline. They just said after the draft. I assume that'll be in May. I would guess about mid-May they would make their hire.
Okay.
So maybe about a month.
All
right, Dave. Only piece of news is user-generated today. My third mock draft went up on the site, up on Steelers Depot this morning, sticky to the top of the page for you guys to check out so we can run through my selections there. Starting things off here at number 20 overall. And again, this is a mock draft from the perspective of what I think the Steelers will do, not what I would do if I was hired as the next GM, as that out-of-house hire. And that's
reflected. You better say that about 4 more times.
Yeah, I wrote that in the post and no one has read it, and everyone's yelling at me for bad picks when I'm not making them because I love this guy, and that's reflected in the first pick here with Desmond Ridder, the 20th overall pick. You guys know my thoughts and certainly know Dave's thoughts on Desmond Ridder, not super high on him. I don't believe Malik Willis will be there. I did not project a trade up here in this mock because it does get a little messier to do, and I can certainly understand the reason to draft Ridder, whether that's the leadership, the maturity. I'm sure that's been very impressive to Pittsburgh from an off-field standpoint, as it's probably been to every team. What he did for that program in general, a mobile guy, played in a semi-pro style offense, a more pro style offense than other quarterbacks in this class. I can understand why Pittsburgh would be interested in Desmond Ridder.
All right, and you don't use any mock simulators in these?
Not for this.
Right. I don't like them. I don't think you care for them that much either. What was kind of in your head as of maybe the quarterbacks off the board? Malik Willis, obviously one of those was in your head. Kind of run through it. Was a Kenny Pickett off the board? How many quarterbacks were off the board? Kind of when you maybe put this together.
Yeah, it's all in my head, and I just don't like using the mock simulator for this because I want to be able to basically pick the guys that I think fit the best. Basically, I don't want to not put a guy in the mock draft because, he was off the board in my simulator, whatever the case. And those can get weird and guys can fall and sometimes you get even more unrealistic results there. Willis in my head was off the board. Pickett, I guess, kind of was. And then from there, it was the rest of them. So I really only went in strongly thinking that, okay, Willis is not available. The rest, I guess, more theoretically would be, but ultimately I still decided on Ridder.
Okay. Now, the two that we talked about last week that are invited to the draft are Willis and Matt Corral. Did we pay that much mind? Should we pay that much mind overall, or is that just so-and-so wanted to stay home and celebrate with a family?
Well, it's important because the fact that, we know that Willis and Corral were invited and accepted means that they're very likely to be first round picks. So that's important. Now, the question is, as you're referencing, does that speak poorly of Ridder or Pickett in their first round chances? And we don't know that. If they were invited and declined, then it would actually speak positively of them because they were considered enough of a first round lock to be invited. If they weren't invited, then that would speak poorly to their draft status on Thursday night. But we don't know until we find out if they were invited or not. We can't really conclude anything from the guys who are not there. But for Corral and Willis, to me, that says that Willis will obviously be a first round pick, and that tells me Corral's going to be a first round pick too, and probably a fairly high one.
In your head, do you have and it would just be a guess, how many quarterbacks do you think go in the first round this year?
I'm going to say now 4 and God, it could even be 5. There's rumors. It's just so hard to separate fact from fiction, but Willis, Corral, because they were invited. And even if those guys have an Aaron Rodgers slide, you still go in the first round. Pickett, Ridder, I think are the 4 that go. And I've even heard some rumors that Howell could go end of the first round.
Were you in any way swayed to put Ridder in there because of some of the recent, I guess, reports saying the Steelers really like Ridder and how people could know they like him better than the next one? I don't know, but were you in any way kind of swayed by that because of the recency of it?
Probably a little bit. It'd be hard for me to deny that I wouldn't be. I don't know if the reporting said they liked Ridder more than the next guy. They just said that they were liked and were impressed by Ridder's maturation, which I can understand. I think they will value his experience as a 4-year starter. There's a bigger menu to look at and examine in his career. I think Pittsburgh likes that easier projection, especially for a non-Power 5 guy. But obviously Ridder, playing FBS, played against big schools, showed what he could do against Notre Dame and things like that, and had a good Senior Bowl showing overall as well. So you guys know my thoughts on him. The biggest reason to not put Ridder here is the lack of accuracy. And as you've mentioned, Kevin Colbert said the biggest thing he looks for in a quarterback is accuracy. To me, Ridder needs to be much more consistent and just better overall in that category. So that'd be the biggest pull to me against the Steelers drafting Desmond Ridder.
If they ended up drafting Ridder, that would be the first question out of my mouth for him. And I would present back to him his full quote and say, all right, what did you see on tape that would lead you to say that Ridder's more than adequate enough in the accuracy department?
And at which point Bert would say, Dave Bryan, we're going to ask you to leave and never come back.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all hypothetical anyway, because there's no way I would be allowed in that room anyway. So,
right. So that's to pick Desmond Ridder. Again, not what I personally would do, but what I think is certainly plausible. And this could change. I really haven't sat down and tried to think about, who their next quarterback's going to be. I think Willis is number 1 for them. Who's number 2 is really messy. And you could certainly argue any other of the 4 quarterbacks being a real candidate here. And we have to pay Corral more mind, given that we know that he's viewed as probably a first-round pick and a top 20, 25 kind of guy. Because even if Corral was viewed as maybe he goes late day 1, if some team trades up in the back half, the final 5 picks of the first round, he probably wouldn't be getting an invite because then you're sitting in that green room for 4 or 5 hours, and that's just a bad, uncomfortable look overall. So Corral's invitation tells me he's kind of viewed as a top 15 kind of guy.
In other words, they're not going to run the risk of embarrassing him if somebody didn't know something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that list again, you never know what could happen on draft day. And obviously Aaron Rodgers, fell into 24. So, it can't happen. But usually these guys are invited based on a high level of confidence they're going to be drafted and drafted fairly early. Now there's 21 of them, and so they can't all go in the top 21 picks. So some guys would probably last, but especially for the quarterbacks, because like the spotlight is so hot on them, you don't want a guy sitting until even pick 31 because you're gonna have all the cutaways to them sitting there by themselves or with their family looking nervous. And generally speaking, that means we'll have to look at the quarterbacks that have been invited in past years and see where they were drafted, and just to kind of get a lay of the land. Now, some of it's, they're number 1, number 2 overall picks, and so it's a little less meaningful, but I'd be curious of like the non-obvious top picks of quarterbacks who were invited, where those guys went.
Okay. I could probably pull that at least from the last 5 years, I think.
Yeah. I mean, obviously 2 years ago, there was no in-person draft, but right. I'd just be curious of the numbers there. So Desmond Ridder, the pick at number 20. At number 52 overall, pretty chalk here. This is a very common selection in these mock drafts, and rightfully so. Jaquan Brisker, the safety from Penn State, checking the boxes of the positional coach, being at his pro day with Grady Brown, and also attending that was Jerry Olsavsky and Brian Flores. So Pittsburgh well represented at the Penn State pro day. Earlier this year, safety still an outstanding need, the biggest short-term immediate need on this team right now. He's a good athlete overall, good RAS score. That's important for Pittsburgh, especially with top of the draft type of safeties. He's a versatile guy and just a good player overall.
Yeah, that was who I had in my first mock, and that's going to be hard one to go away from for all the reasons that you just stated, combined with the fact that this team really still hasn't addressed the position overall. Yes, they have re-signed Miles Killebrew early in the offseason. Yes, they re-signed Carl Joseph a couple weeks ago there, but neither one of those guys should be viewed as guys that if something happened that they did have to start the season, you would hope that you'd have somebody waiting in the wings to soon dethrone them of that starting position. And you even have a guy like Terrell Edmonds still unsigned at this point. Not only that, Terrell Edmonds is ripped down his Twitter account, I guess, now at this point. He still has his Instagram account still going. At this point, just overall in general, I'm surprised Terrell Edmonds remains unsigned at this point. And the only thing that I can think of, maybe the reason behind that, is maybe there is some other team that has a good enough contract out there for him that it would impact the plus minus, the overall formula when it comes to that team maybe potentially losing a compensatory draft pick, that they're wanting to hold off on officially signing him until that first, Monday or Tuesday after the draft hits. So that's my only theory behind it now at this point. Which would lead you to believe that, okay, maybe Edmonds is going to get a decent enough money. In other words, maybe a little bit more than that 1-year deal that James Conner signed last year, but yet not outstanding money. And then obviously not a lot of offers out there on the table, or else it'd probably be already signed, sealed, and delivered at this point. I guess it depends on how you look at this. The longer he remains unsigned, is that a better chance of him returning to the Steelers, or a better chance of what I just said of him maybe already have something lined up and just waiting until after the compensatory portion of the offseason ends? Or I don't know. But as it relates back to the Steelers, the longer they go with somebody without good experience that you could visually see as at least a week one starter for them, the more apt they are to draft a guy like Jaquan Brisker, who, pretty decent chance that a kid like that could actually start for you in week one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just as Edmonds did back in 2018. Now, granted, that was a bit by force when Burnett got hurt early in the summer, and Edmonds stepped in and played well enough. They just kind of rolled with it. I obviously don't know what's happening there with the safety movement. It's really slowed to a crawl. My thought is there's two factors. One, until Tyrann Mathieu decides where he's going, that's kind of like the first shoe that has to drop for other teams to really get super interested and start really pursuing Edmonds in terms of, okay, that's kind of our plan B. And then also at this point with a draft just a couple days away, I wonder if Mathieu especially, and kind of again that he's the shoe to drop that puts everyone else in a holding pattern, if he's waiting until after the draft to see exactly what rosters look like, so he doesn't go sign with a team that happens to maybe draft a guy, or just make sure he knows he's going to the best situation possible. Because at this point, there's really no urgency for him to get a deal done prior to the draft.
Especially when it looks like he's going to sign for less than $10 million per.
Right. Yeah.
I think.
So,
and that's been my thought all along. And I've taken a lot of criticism for that, but he hasn't signed yet. You would think if there was a big deal out there anywhere close to 13 million, he'd be all over it by now.
Right. So his gamble might be, I just want to get a lay of the rosters and see exactly where these safeties go, and I can make a final decision after the draft, and that helps out a team from a compensatory standpoint, then all the better. It kind of works out for both sides, I suppose.
And look, nothing's going to impact the Steelers' compensatory side of things at this point. So, if they had a good enough deal out there on the table for a guy like Tyrann, he would have signed it by now if he thought that maybe there was no chance of him getting it topped.
That's a good point. Yeah. I imagine Pittsburgh is not presenting the best offer out there, but just saying, it's a reasonable deal and you come in and be part of a great defense. And that's going to be the pitch to Tyrann Mathieu.
And once again, if he did sign, I fully imagine it being exactly the same deal that Miles Jack signed. So it'd be 2 years, $16 million, probably split right down the middle as far as 2022 money that he would put in his pocket being total at $8 million, and obviously the rest coming at that. It'd be a kind of guy that you could cut after one season if you deemed you needed to, on top of it. So, but that's obviously a different storyline. But I fully am on board. I could really, of all the picks on this mock draft of yours this time around, that's the one that I could most see coming to fruition.
Me too, honestly. And again, this is a pretty common one. You had it. I'm sure other people have had it in their mock drafts. So bit of a layup. And by the way, if you factor in his, if you look at his RAS score, it's 9.14, but that does not factor in his actually improved vertical at his pro day. So factor that in, it's 9.48, which is right in line with the elite RAS scores that past Steelers safeties have posted.
Okay.
Round 3, sticking secondary and going back to Cincinnati with Kobe Bryant, the other corner from the Bearcats. We know that Sauce Gardner gets all the plays, a top 15, top 10 kind of guy. Bryant played opposite of him and played well overall. Not the best athlete in the world, but good size, productive. Again, Pittsburgh at that pro day. I believe Bryant was part of the pro day dinner quartet, I guess it would be, with Mike Tomlin. So, know each other well enough.
Did he fit in what the Steelers look for?
No, he missed on length, actually. He's a little stubbier for being 6'1". I think he's got sub 31-inch arms, and then I think he might have missed in the agility drills or one of them. I have to go back and check, but he did not even get the 1 box away category.
Okay. But do you have a feeling, just kind of based on what we know right now, which obviously isn't much when it comes to pre-draft visitors, do you have the feeling that the Steelers are going to double up on a school?
It's possible. I mean, it's, I don't think anyone goes into the draft planning, we're going to take 2 guys from X school, but given just how
Oklahoma State.
No, that's probably true. Yeah. But the point is about the prospect, not about the school.
Right.
But I mean, obviously Georgia has a bunch of kids. Cincinnati has a bunch of kids. Penn State has some prospects. So it's certainly possible, just given all the places that those guys went, all the big schools that have so many prospects. And the Bearcats have as many prospects as basically any school, maybe not named Georgia or Bama right now. It's not just Ritter. I mean, they have, I don't even know, 5, 6 guys that are going to get drafted this year from that program. And
just coming out of all these COVID years on top of it, it feels like the Steelers might want to try sticking to the major programs. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Just trying to go as safe as they can with blue chip players,
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's the pick there. Round 3, 84 overall, Kobe Bryant from Cincinnati. Round 4, finally addressing receiver here and going back to the offense. Bo Melton, the receiver from Rutgers. I think is a really good fit. Kind of caught my eye at the Senior Bowl with his explosiveness and route running ability to separate the top of his route. Good level athlete, and he checked every single box in their what they look for study.
Man, we can't get away from these old receivers this year. Bo Melton, almost 23 years of age. Danny Gray already 23 or right around 23. So they're Calvin Austin out of Memphis is another one over 23 already. Seems like some of the ones at the Velus Jones out of Tennessee, another guy that you could probably make a good argument for being a Steeler draft pick. 20 right around 25 for him. Man. Yeah, and I think COVID obviously played a role in some of these super seniors this year. But two guys that I not named George Pickens that you could probably see the Steelers drafting this year because of all-star game experience and because of them hitting the measurable thresholds. Bo Melton and Danny Gray both up there in age already.
Right, but that's just common to this whole draft class because of the super seniors, because the NCAA allowed guys who were seniors last year to go back to school for this past season. They allowed those guys 2 seasons ago, I should say, to return for this past 2021 year because a lot of those guys didn't get to play a lot. Maybe they didn't play football at all for a variety of reasons, all COVID related. And so it is creating, not just with those guys, not just with the receiver position, but across the board, a much older draft class.
Okay.
So that's the pick. Bo Melton, round 4, round 6, going back to defense.
I went back again and tried to look early this morning at the Rutgers Pro Day, and I could not find anybody of substance there.
I think they had a scout, I want to say. Did I note that in my track? Did I have anything in my tracker about that? I thought I noted it might have been one of those appears to be guys. I know they had somebody there, though. At least I believe they had somebody there.
I went back and looked at all the galleries and all like that.
Yeah, let me see what my tracker. Yeah, I have unknown personal member appears to be analyst Tosin Kazim.
Okay.
But I do believe they had somebody there. Just had a tough time identifying who that somebody was.
And that's close enough that it would have been. What day did that? What all pro days was going on that day? Do you remember?
I can use my tracker and see what was up that day.
That was on the 22nd, so the Liberty was that day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Texas A&M, Iowa State, Mississippi State, Virginia Tech. It's a pretty busy pro day.
Okay.
Yeah. Plus, it was at the Senior Bowl, and Pittsburgh had really all their offensive top guys at the Senior Bowl because they were watching the quarterbacks. So they had Tomlin, they had Colbert, they had Canada, also Sullivan. So it's good to have the offensive guys get eyes on for the quarterbacks, but also watching guys like Bo Melton.
All right, carry on.
Round 6, edge help here with Jeffrey Gunter, Coastal Carolina, kind of shades of the Alex Highsmith selection, a bit bigger guy, not Power 5, but still FBS level, but really strong productivity. Had a really nice career with the Chanticleers, I think. Coastal Carolina, 38.5 tackles for loss, 17 sacks, also 9 forced fumbles in his career. So
is that the post celebration where they what was the one that did the celebration that I got extra credit for it at one time?
I'm not
where they leaned over and touched hands. Was that Coastal Carolina?
I don't. It's not even jogging in memory right now, so I'm not sure. I wish I knew what you were talking about.
Okay, I'll have to Google it then.
Okay, but back to Jeffrey Gunter. Yeah, bigger guys, 6'4", 256. Pittsburgh generally likes their edge guys to be bigger. When they've gone with leaner, lankier guys, it has not often worked out for them. I think about Sutton Smith and Travis Feeney's and even Roche last year, though he got poked, so we never really will know what happened there. But usually I like the guys
the fusion dance.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
How did you forget that? And I remember
No,
it.
How were you describing it? You were just like, what did you say, touching hands? How am I supposed to get fusion?
Well, that's sort of what they do, right?
I mean, they do, but...
Well, how am I? Don't boo me. I'm not wrong. Why are you booing me? I'm right.
You're a bad password partner. We be bad on the game.
That I am.
I can't get fusion out of touching hands. Yeah, thank you. That's a Dragon Ball Z reference to everyone else who's over 30 not understanding our conversation right now. I had some context to it. Anyway, yeah, Gunter, good
you
production.
Misspelled Coastal. I'm gonna you.
Oh God.
Costal. Even I picked that out. So there, you're gonna criticize me. I'm gonna criticize you.
All right. Oh, it's mutual assured destruction. Let me edit that. Sorry. Anyway, yeah. So Gunter, 6th round, edge help, just good production overall. I think they had somebody at no, I actually don't know if somebody was at the pro day or not. I could not determine that. But
I haven't watched. Does he use his hands well? I mean,
yeah, I gotta watch. Let me pull up. We did the report on him, so I haven't spent a lot of time with him. He also missed just one box and or what they look for study, and that was the 3-cone time, which has been generally more forgiving. So I try to lean on some of those things. Later in my mock draft, let me try to pull up the report once the page loads. It's being a little slow for some reason. But yeah, I'll have to kind of go back to some of his tape because I did not do the initial report on him. That was our new friend of the new part of the team here, Andrew Shaver, who did that April 9th. Let's see, on the pros on Gunter, he says, quick off the snap, experience in a 3-4 defense, looks natural in coverage, long arms and wingspan. On the bad, says his pass rush moves are a bit limited, plays tall against the run. Tackling needs to be better overall. So it looks like maybe a bit of a fairly athletic project.
Okay.
But that's edge help there because although this team, signed Gennard Avery, that's just a 1-year deal. That's a pretty big flyer, and certainly it's not going to prevent this team from adding more help.
Absolutely not. And they need to continue to address his edge position even after the addition of Gennard Avery.
Right. Round 7, 225 overall. Always been including a running back in my mocks, much to your chagrin, I'm sure, Dave. But here going Ty Davis Price out of LSU. I think this guy could go a bit higher overall. I was really high on his tape whenever I did the report on Davis Price. 6 foot and 3/8, 219 pounds. Not much of a receiver or pass protector in college, but a true bowling ball bruising type of running back, a guy that really has legitimate power and strength and, did not have gaudy numbers, but I think showed and was capable of kind of handling the workload this past year for the Tigers.
Okay.
Big fan of his team overall.
I'm not a huge fan of them. I admit that there's a chance, obviously, that they could add a running back in this draft, but I'm not a big fan of them doing so.
Yeah, I mean, it would be 7th round pick, and so it's not the worst thing in the world.
All right, and rounding it out is a guy that probably of all the guys you have on this mock, outside Jaquan Brisker, probably one that you could probably potentially see because coming in for a pre-draft visit and all like that, and they could always stand to add to that inside linebacker room, and that's Mark Robinson out of Ole Miss, converted running back.
Right. Yeah. Just going off the list of the known pre-draft visitors, this one makes sense. Again, as you said, the former running back at Presbyterian and also in his early days at Ole Miss, then switched to linebacker this past year and put up 91 tackles and 3 sacks, 34 reps on the bar during his pro day workout. Undersized, under 6'4", 230, but adding some depth there because you got to realize next year, Robert Spillane, Marcus Allen, and UG3 are all going to be free agents. And Devin Bush may be a free agent as well, assuming his 5th-year option is not picked up, which we almost certainly believe that it will not be picked up. And so you might want to add some linebackers to think about the future of that position.
And look, what are the odds that Spillane, Marcus Allen, and UG3 all make the 53 this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I don't think Robinson would make it above those guys. I mean, unless something dramatic happens in camp. But could that be a practice squad guy, Robinson, for year 1? And then if those guys, because it's doubtful all 4 of those guys are going to be Steelers next year is kind of my thought. And so you start adding to the pipeline, you give yourself some options for next offseason.
And it sure makes you wonder what's going to happen with Buddy Johnson this year. Look, I mean, I realize you get past the 3rd round, 4th round, and everything's really kind of a crapshoot of what you get as far as players that maybe can contribute even one season for you. It sure would be nice if they at least were able to get a year or 2 out of Buddy Johnson, even if it was heavy special teams action out of him. So, right now, big question mark when it comes to Buddy Johnson in this upcoming season.
Sure. Yeah. It'll be a big year number 2 for Buddy Johnson. So those are the The 7 picks there: Desmond Ridder, Jaquan Brisker, Kobe Bryant, Bo Melton, Jeffrey Gunter, Ty Davis Price, and Mark Robinson. So overall,
I'm gonna guess that you're not gonna get any awards from the commentators on this one.
yeah, I think people generally don't like it. That seems to be the theme of all mock drafts this year, is that people don't really like it, but that's okay.
And I think it comes down to what flavor of the quarterback you get.
I think it's really don't include a quarterback and people will be happy because they'll hate any quarterback you put in there.
Yeah, we don't talk. We always talk a lot about, and on purpose about what we think the Steelers would do. Would you bypass the quarterback position altogether?
Again, that's a tough question to ask in a vacuum because it's what are other options.
Assuming you didn't trade up, and assuming you could have your choice of any quarterback in this year's draft.
Then no. I mean, I have first-round grades on 2 quarterbacks. If I have a first-round grade on a quarterback, I'm going to take him given the need there, and that's Malik Willis and Matt Corral. So if I didn't have first-round grades on guys, then I would be bypassing. But if you give me that hypothetical of all those options, then I would take one of the 2 quarterbacks who I have a first-round grade on.
Yeah, I think I would probably just go a different route. Obviously, it would depend on who's on the board, at that time, not at the quarterback position. But man, that's code for me. I think saying I've watched enough quarterback tape this offseason so far, but I would be more apt, I think, to just bypass the position in Hall.
I mean, that's fine. Not to the reality of it. If my 2 guys with first round grades aren't there, then yeah, I would certainly be much more strongly considering bypassing the position entirely. If Willis and Corral are not there, which is certainly possible to happen. So from a realism standpoint, my answer could change from my, in theory, in a perfect world, answer or question that you asked me.
Sure.
So that's the mock draft up on Steelers Depot. I will do one more next week right before the draft, and I assume you'll be doing the same next week, Dave.
Yeah, I'll have a final out there.
All right. You sound excited. Do want to mention, speaking of quarterbacks here, really briefly, one guy I started watching last night, not a first-round pick, a day 3 kind of guy, but I've been asked by several people, can you do a profile on this guy? Check him out. He's actually really good. And I've watched only 2 games so far. I'm going to watch a couple more tonight. But Colt Kelly from Southeastern Louisiana is really impressed me, Dave, overall. He's a big guy. He's like a Brock Osweiler type, 6'7". I forget what he weighs, 240-something. But just his overall, progressions, how quick the ball comes out of his hand, a good arm overall, his placement. He's worked under center before. Watching some of the games from him, I was really impressed.
He was invited to the combine, wasn't he?
Yes, combine invite, and he played in the NFLPA Bowl. I'm not sure if he played. He was not at the Senior Bowl. I don't know if he was a Shrine Game dude as well, but a little bit of all-star experience.
Like 6'7" or something like that. Big kid. Yeah.
Big kid, but looked good. Like, legitimately, I was like, wow, this guy's actually, I think, draftable. So I'll have the report on that. Because could this team add a quarterback late in the draft? Not going to rule anything out either. All right, Dave. Let's see. We've done our Steelers, what they look for studies. I've been kind of trying to motor through some of them to get that content up for you guys. So I've done, I think, 2 more since we last talked. Let me pull up the other one here while I vamp a little bit. One on interior offensive line, another on the edge guys. So we'll start with the interior offensive line of the guys who checked every single box, and there are 3 of them. I am counting undersized tackles who could project a guard as well. That's Luke Fortner from Kentucky, Cole Strange from UT Chattanooga, and Tyler Smith from Tulsa. Smith's the tackle who could stay at tackle because he has really good length, but also may get moved inside. So Fortner, Strange, Smith, the top guys on the list.
Smith is the real the mauler of them. For sure. Strange, wasn't Strange a senior Senior Bowl?
Fortner and Strange were there. I think, yeah, I don't think Smith was there, but Fortner and Strange were.
Yeah, I don't remember being overly impressed by Strange, but Fortner, I think there's a little something to him to work with, and the Tyler Smith tape is intriguing to say the least there. So interesting that only 3. Who who are the ones that were one box away intrigue you the most? Obviously, Zion Johnson's on that list. I think you just didn't you do Cam Jurgens on the site here just recently? Here he might end up. I wonder if he might end up being the best center in this class. To be honest with you, overall. Okay. Trying to think of who else on this. Volson was an interesting an interesting late round possible prospect there of the guys on this list here.
Yeah, other guys, Alec Lindstrom, the other Boston. Well, there's three of them, but Boston College offensive lineman Lindstrom, the younger brother of Chris Lindstrom, who's in the NFL with the Falcons, right? He missed the weight by 1 pound, so he got as close as you can gaze a cheeseburger away. He's probably 300 right now and should be on the list. Cade Bates from Tennessee, versatile guys, played tackle, played guard. I think he's played some center as well.
I didn't see it with him. He was a Senior Bowl kid too, I think, and I just didn't see it with him.
Yeah, he'll have to play inside. He's not a tackle. He's not athletic or quick enough, but I think he's pretty strong. Look comfortable in his stance. I think he has good flexibility. So it's I liked him enough as a day 3 kind of guy.
All right.
And I've heard some buzz on Zach Thomas from San Diego State, although his vert was really bad. And someone said Bill Dunkel from San Diego State. I know nothing about him, but I heard he's a real good mauler as well.
Isn't Deaton Dawson a center or no?
I think so. Didn't he probably replace, was that Jack Anderson? I don't know that for a fact about Dawson, but I think so.
All right.
So with the edge guys, so the interior guys, a little less exciting overall because I think even Fortner and Strange, they're more day 2 guys. I don't think Pittsburgh's going to be addressing interior offensive line day 1 or day 2 of the draft. But the edge guys, to me, a couple of interesting names there. The 4 guys who checked every single box are Arnold Ebiketie from Penn State, D'Angelo Malone from Western Kentucky, which is one of our guys, Sam Williams from Ole Miss, and Nick Benito from Oklahoma. And so Ebiketie is going to be a top 32, top 35, we'll say, kind of guy. So don't consider him for Pittsburgh. Williams has some off-field concerns. So the 2 guys I'm really circling are Malone and Benito. And I know, Dave, you especially have talked a ton about D'Angelo Malone, so I'm sure you were happy to see him check every single box.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did kind of cheat ahead on that name in my first mock as well too, by going through some of your previous what they look for, and it seemed like he was going to be one to come out of that. And we know the Steelers aren't just most recently with Highsmith, they're not afraid of kind of those smaller school kids, especially they go to the All-Star game and compete and do well. And D'Angelo Malone did just that at the Senior Bowl there. Brandon Hunt was at the Western Kentucky Pro Day. So there's some smoke around that fire, I think, for sure. And the fact that he's checked all those boxes and the fact that there's a need there, he's another one that just like Brisker, the safety, and a couple of these other guys that are going to be very, very hard to keep out of a final mock draft for all the reasons that we just said.
Yeah, and Benito, that'll be good for Pens fans with Nick Benito. That's literally the former center's name. Interesting guy. I don't know about his bend around the edge. We tested pretty well, but I thought he was a little stiff hip in some of the tape that I saw. Not as long as some of the other guys on this list as well.
Okay.
And then Williams has, I think, he got arrested in Pittsburgh, stayed away from any sort of like potential character guys.
Arnold, you think no way, or you'd be very surprised if a guy like Arnold, how do you pronounce his last name? Ebiketie?
I think I say Ebiketie.
Okay, Ebiketie lasts until the Steelers' second round selection.
Yeah, I'd be really surprised if he made it to 52. If he does, you might have to consider him just based on the talent alone, although it not being an urgent need. But I think he's going to be, to me, he's an easy first round grade. I think he'll probably be no worse than, we'll say, top 40, but I think even higher than that. I think he probably gets the last, 7-8 picks of round 1.
All right.
And I'll have, for the first time ever, we'll do a what they look for safeties edition. I have enough data on safeties. It's not as big of a sample size as I would like. I went through the numbers last night. Some interesting, kind of weird results there, to be honest with you, but we'll have that up later this week.
Of those kids that were 1 box away on the edge study there, any of them stick out the most that could potentially be on the board in the second round? Because you obviously have George Karlaftis out of Purdue on there. People are expecting him to go early in this thing. Thibodeau's another one that people are expecting off the board. I would think, Trayvon Walker too, right?
Yeah, he might be the number one overall pick still. He'll be a top 5 guy.
Right. But what about the other guys on that list in that could potentially be on the board?
Yeah, less about second round guys, but just maybe some more day 3 guys that fit. Jeffrey Gunter, who's in my mock draft,
Right.
Dominique Robinson from Miami, Ohio, Myjai Sanders from Cincinnati, another Bearcat name to mention, and Drake Jackson from USC were kind of the 4 guys of that 1 box away category who weren't going to be first round picks, who didn't have off field issues that kind of fit the most. So it's Gunter, Robinson, Sanders, and Jackson.
All right, fair enough. I think one of those 8 to 10 or however many names that we can come up with that are not first rounders there. I like the chances of one of those being drafted by the Steelers for sure.
Right. And Michael Clemens was on that list, but also has some off-field questions. And so that's why I did not mention his name. And his 40 time was especially poor, 4.85. So that's not going to help his chances of coming to Pittsburgh. All right, Dave, that's it for the studies in my mock draft. Anything you're working on draft-wise right now? I should just give you the courtesy ask.
No, I mean, I just trying to finish up some tape watching on several guys right now and getting things ready for the final mock draft and all. So I've watched way too much quarterback tape at this point. I'll tell you that.
No such thing. Maybe there was such thing. I don't know. Last thing I want to mention here before we get to reader emails, Dave, this happened last month, but was kind of unearthed, I think, by the official Big Ben Twitter account. He was at the Ignite conference last week, which he's been at over the years, and was asked a couple of Steelers-related questions in that, talking about the emotional Week 17 win over the Cleveland Browns this past year, Monday night, prime time, the final home game of Ben Roethlisberger's career. And so he talked about what that game meant to him and had a little quip and story about the end of that game, the kneel down after the interception by Trey Norwood that put Pittsburgh on the field, surprisingly, one last time. And so Ben tells a story and says, quote, the interception happened. And it's like, holy cow, I have to go back out on the field. Mason Rudolph, the backup, he grabs his helmet. And I'm like, no, young man, not yet. And there were laughs and much joy to be had. But some Steeler fans took umbrage with Ben's commentary and
not many,
perceived
but some
at the perceived shot.
There's more that are jumping up and down, enjoying him. I guess clowning on Mason to some degree there than there are. I haven't gone back and looked at it close enough. Some people say there's no way that could have happened because Mason wasn't even close to going out on the field. But I believe this is kind of the second time that that Roethlisberger's kind of referenced something along those lines. Look, right from the get-go, these two weren't going to be besties, I don't think. And it'll be fun to maybe later on down the line when Ben's more removed from the game and maybe even Mason at some point to see if the two will do some, to ask them point blank, but for whatever reason, I don't think Ben has liked Mason Rudolph and maybe vice versa. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe Mason came in too gung ho. Maybe all of it stipulated from that very first interview that Mason gave. I don't know, but there seems to be some sort of, or seems to have had been some sort of wedge in between these two. Once again, right from the get go, and I don't know if. Ben's maybe embellishing things at this point. Ben never embellishes things. But this is going to be a talking point, beyond today. I'll tell you that much, until it's not,
Right. Yeah, I don't know what kind of led to that. I don't want to call it beef, but just the icy relationship the two seem to have. We don't know exactly the details of their relationship, but my guess is just, that was the first guy that kind of threatened Ben's job potentially. That had never happened before. And he was the guy, the first round grade. This guy might be the heir to the future. Remember Josh Dobbs the year before? They were like, Colbert was specifically saying this is not about Ben. This is just about backup and depth and adding a player like that. Mason was the guy that kind of changed that. So I think that's probably, no matter what Mason would have done, probably that relationship would have never been cozy.
All right.
And to the story, I don't you go back and watch the clips, Ben never actually seems to interact with Mason. It didn't seem like he was telling it in that like literal sense that he was like telling Mason, no, put your helmet. Oh, you take your helmet off. I'm going in the game. But I think it was just kind of the metaphor of, I'm assuming, a root of wherever he was at was putting his helmet on. And someone else kind of said, no, you're not going in. Pence getting his helmet on and he's going out there. And I know that people also took umbrage with the comment of Mason Rudolph, the backup, kind of quoting that. But Ben was talking to a non-football crowd. It was more of a religious, Christian like conference. That's what Ignite Conference is about. And so I think Ben was using that for context there. But I understand, did you have to include that part of the story in there in the context of your game? Probably not. And so certainly there was a little bit of passive aggressiveness included there.
Yeah, Ben never does that.
Never. So I'm not trying to like carry Ben's water here. I think there is a little bit of passive aggression in there, but I think just clarifying at least my interpretation of hearing the comments for whatever it's worth, which is probably worth very little. Ben also asked about the top 2 moments of his 18-year career, of which there are many great moments. The 2 ones he picked, though, I think fairly obvious to Steeler fans. One, of course, being the game-winning touchdown to Santonio Holmes in the Super Bowl 43 to beat the Arizona Cardinals, and also the immaculate tackle, whatever they call it, on Nick Harper in the 2005 divisional game over the Colts. And so I have some quotes up on Steelers Depot that kind of retells both of those stories. All right, Dave, anything else you want to talk about today, or should we move on to reader emails?
Probably a good time to move on to reader emails because there's just not a lot out there to kind of discuss today. So we'll kind of make today's show a little bit shorter so we can carry on with other things. And we'll as Alex mentioned, we have a live stream later on tonight, so we'll be able to get some more time in and answer more questions on top of it there. Let's see. Chris Bailey writes in, "Hi, Dave and Alex. Hope you're both well. Wanted to start by saying how much I have loved the recent roundtables. Please, can they be a feature in the future of the podcast? I mean, you know, a lot of times we have, because of the way the show moves and the news cycle and all like that. I mean, once we get past the draft, I think we'll have a lot of these guys back on to actually discuss the draft picks, because a lot of these guys will be focusing in tighter on certain aspects of you know, like extended profiles on some of these guys as we move forward into the off season. But if you're talking about in season kind of stuff, I mean, the way the kind of the season moves and all like that, it's less likely that we're going to have roundtables kind of in season, if you will. But I mean, for the rest of this off season, yeah, we'll probably have a couple of these guys on moving forward. He says, my comment is regarding the possibility of a guest draft analyst. He says, I agree with Dave that the Depot guys are great as they definitely watch the tape. However, an outsider guy you might want to consider is Nate Tice from The Athletic. He says he heard him on a recent podcast and thought it provided great tape-led insight. Once again, if we deemed it being valuable to the show, we would probably go that route. But I don't think at any point has Alex come to me and says, you know, who would be great as a great draft analyst on a show outside of our guys. And I don't think I've ever gone to Alex that way either. Not saying that we wouldn't have outsiders on. It's just, we know for a fact our guys watch tape, you know, and they know the Steelers as well too there. So that makes it a little bit more, you know, common interest in that. I mean, at some point, will we maybe have an outside draft analyst on the show past this year? I'm not, never say never, right?
Sure. And I think Nate Tice does great work, and there's some other really smart, creative football minds out there. But I think it's also important, just, we want to promote our own guys. We want to talk about our own, so that Jonathan and Josh and Tom and Owen and Devin become as familiar names and voices to the podcast as Dave and I's voices are. We want to be able to celebrate the work that our team does, and they do great work, and want to give those guys as much exposure and opportunity to talk ball as possible. So we don't want to feel like we're robbing them of that chance to bring on a maybe slightly bigger name outsider guy. These guys on our team work extremely hard, and we want to just give them every chance possible to make their impact on the site.
Right. At some point too, I mean, maybe at this next year, I'm going to be dropping off even more, so, some of these guys are probably going to be the new kind of voice along with Alex of the podcast. more so than they are obviously now. So, more exposure we can give some of these guys. And I think all of them do a great job, man. And in fact, and it goes back to the fact too, is I know they watch tape, and
Right.
I love talking to other people that I know for sure not only have a good grasp of the team, but watch tape as well too. He says another question he has is regarding the term stack and shed. He says you talk about this a lot regarding wide receivers, but what exactly does it mean? All right, Chris. First of all, stack and shed. That phrase together is more so used with defensive players, linebackers, and defensive linemen specifically. And to stack and shed really is for a defensive player to be in control of an offensive player, whether it be an offensive lineman coming to the second level, or if a defensive lineman's case, taking on that offensive lineman at the line of scrimmage and really doing a good job of controlling, stacking him where you're kind of on top of him. And that way, as a defensive player, you can flash one way to the other or discard the player and shed. That way you're shedding the block there and being in control. And you hear the term stack and shed, I think more so with any other defensive player or defensive position as a linebacker position. But you will see at times, depending on who's doing the breakdown, of it being used with a defensive lineman as well too, being able to stack and shed. But for the most part, I think you're going to hear that term used the most with an inside linebacker being able to control, stack an offensive lineman, and then shed him, dispose of him that way. Now, when you're talking about wide receivers, the term that you'll hear about that is just stacking a wide receiver, or a wide receiver stacking. And that is the ability to get off the line and more so in press kind of man type coverages, and be able to stack, get on top of the outside defender, generally vertically.
Yeah, that's really well said and well explained. I don't have a whole lot to add there. I would just say the way that I've always heard it phrased for defenders when you're talking about stacking and shedding is you want to create space. As a pass rusher, you want to eat up space. You want to get real tight to the blocker's body. So once you shed him, you quickly get past him, and the offensive lineman cannot recover. If you have more space between you and the blocker, he's going to have a better chance to recover if you're able to shed. So in pass rush, you want to eat up space. In the run game, you want to have space so that you're locking your arms out, or almost locking your arms out, and you're able to get vision on the football, and you're able to stack the guy. So whichever direction the running back goes, left or right, you're able to find the runner there and get off the block. So you want to keep that space there so that lineman's not tight to your body and kind of swallowing you up. So pass rush, you want to eat up space, and run game, you want to create space, and you do that by stacking and then eventually shedding.
A quick little note here, Matt Bowen, and everybody, if you're not watching the matchup show on ESPN in season, a lot of you have to set your VCRs or DVRs for it, because sometimes when it airs is like 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning or whatnot. But I constantly am taping all those to watch, and it's just great to watch even off season as well too, because you learn so much from the tape breakdown. But Matt Bowen and Greg Cosell both do that in season, along with, I think, Sal Paolantonio is the host of it. Well, Matt Bowen says the matchup draft show airs tomorrow night at 9:30 Eastern time on ESPN. So upon hearing this, run to your VCRs and make sure you change the blinking clock to the correct time, and then set your VCRs for 9:30 Eastern time on ESPN tomorrow night. It looks like they're going to be doing, some of these breakdown pieces. Looks like they're going to have one specifically in Matt Bowen's latest tweet on Desmond Ridder. Now, look, they have to probably accentuate the positives more so in these than the negatives there. But you will learn something by watching the breakdowns that these guys do. I think they did. You want to talk about a guy that we probably should have on, or try to get on, is either Matt Bowen or Greg Cosell.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Cosell, I
right.
think, last week. Yeah, and Bowen is all. I followed Bowen for a decade.
Right. I love those two guys in the way they do. Matt Bowen's about as no nonsense as they come, as is Greg Cosell. So, look, in lieu of us having them on the podcast, how about helping their ratings out and making sure you tune in those shows? Because once again, I personally, and Alex, I don't think you're going to disagree with me. That NFL matchup show is just absolutely fantastic. It should be. It would be, if it was 2 hours long, it wouldn't be long enough for me every week there. And once again, it's a show that, if you're going to watch it religiously, you're probably going to have to tape it, because for some reason it comes on odd hours of the morning there. So I just want to get that shout out there for them.
But that's at 9:30 Tuesday.
9:30 Eastern. Yes.
Okay, so that's a reasonable hour when people actually might be awake watching the television. So that's great news. Yeah, Bowen. It's not hyperbole to say Bowen is literally one of the people that taught me football. Like whenever he worked at National Football Post a decade plus ago, I would remember reading his articles, and they were very easy to read and with diagrams and stuff like that. And I literally still have some of those notes in my folder. So I've always been a big fan of Bowen.
Me too. And I think his tape breakdowns are fantastic. I never missed him at all. And look, that's not a paid advertisement or anything like that. I mean, Alex and I have no problem tipping our hat to the guys that deserve it. And he and Greg Cosell are definitely two of those people there. Let's see. Jay Smith writes in, offensive line and cornerback in the draft. He says, do you guys think, as I do, that there's almost no chance the Steelers draft offensive line or cornerback in round one? He says, because the Steelers spent real money on 3 offensive linemen and 2 cornerbacks in free agency, I'm almost at the point where I think they're not even going to draft offensive linemen in this draft, which I'm 100% fine with. He says, I do think cornerback will be drafted day 3. He says this team needs safety, wide receiver, defensive line, offense, outside linebacker, tight end, not to mention quarterback. No need wasting a pick on offensive lineman this year. He says, thanks for your time and hard work, fellas. Jay Smith, listen, I have been in the corner of not thinking this team will draft an offensive lineman at all for quite a while now here. And is it impossible? I mean, there is a chance, I think that they would, but there's so many needs this team has. And as you mentioned, the way they have addressed the position during the offseason, I definitely don't think it'll be in the first couple of rounds of this draft. And if they did draft an offensive lineman at all, I kind of envision it being with one of those 6th or 7th round selections.
Yeah, in terms of the offensive lineman in the first round, I'm not even sure who that would be based on the box checking. Like Zion Johnson's a name we mentioned quite a bit without Tomlin Court at the pro day. I know they talked to him a ton at the Senior Bowl, but even then the history says it wouldn't be him. So I'm not sure who it would be. Corner, I think, is possible. It's more likely than offensive lineman at the top, but both certainly could be addressed later on, if not in the first round.
Corner, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they drafted a corner. I don't think you would be either. In fact,
in the first round or just in general?
No, not in general, not okay. The first round.
Sure.
Now if one of those, it's one of those things that if the right corner fell, would they consider it in the first round?
Well, again, the big name there would be Andrew Booth. And if a Derek Stingley were to fall, then that's one of those, what you're saying, if someone falls that you wouldn't expect, does the conversation there change? Also, I guess you could stretch and say Sauce Gardner as well. But Andrew Booth is like the most realistic corner name at number 20, who is likely to be there at number 20.
I am not expecting this team to draft a corner or an offensive lineman really in their first 2 picks. And once again, I'll be surprised they draft an offensive lineman at all. Not saying that they won't, but I am expecting them drafting a corner at some point.
Yeah, and hopefully someone with a better athletic package overall. Getting Witherspoon back was important, but I'd like to get more athletic corners on the field. I think just athleticism in general is important for the position, and they just don't have, Wallace and Sutton aren't high-level athletes. And Sutton, by the way, he'll be a free agent after this year as well, correct? So that's something to consider about his future.
All right, let's see if we can get one more in here. let's see, Bryce has forwarded along a mock draft that he's done on using the PFF simulator here. He has Chris Olave from Ohio State, wide receiver at 20th overall. Jalen Petrie from Baylor in round 2. Carson Strong in round 3. Zach Tom in round 4 at 138. Then in round 6, he has Derek Deese Jr., that athletic tight end out of San Jose State in round 6. And his 7 picks is Josh Rivas, the guard out of Kansas State. I haven't watched anything on him. Sincere McCormick out of UTSA, San Antonio, right? Halfback in round 7 there. I've watched just a little bit of him to know who he is here. He wants us to evaluate this real quick here. Look, Olave, first round, I mean, the Steelers like Ohio State people, but they, not having Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin at that pro day, it's easy to punch a hole into thinking Olave won't be that guy. Now, I wouldn't go out and bet my house, but I would probably bet Alex's house.
Yeah. I knew that was coming.
On it not happening there. Petrie, we both think favorable of Jalen Petrie out of Baylor.
Yeah, one of my top guys. And so I'll view this from a personal standpoint, because I don't know if the reader was doing this from the lens of what he thinks the Steelers will do. At the top, I'd be happy with that. Olave and Petrie would be 2 really good picks. Strong in the 3rd. You start to lose me there a little bit because I'm just worried about the medical.
At that point, right?
Yeah.
And why at that point, yeah.
And then from there, the rest of it's kind of more of a mixed bag. But the top 2 picks are definitely nice.
I mean, if you looked at Strong at round 3 as, look, at least we will, come out of this one maybe a backup for the next 4 years. I mean, I suppose. But and look, nobody knew more about Carson Strong early on in the process than I did. And at this point, I'm even at the point, because of that, being concerned about that knee and all like that. I'm, why even draft him at this point? If right. If you're the Steelers and not going to get a guy that in the first round, my view is why even drafting at all. Now, I'm definitely a Carson Strong fan and will root for him wherever he winds up. Interested to see how he's able to overcome this, and him being, air raid product and one that people are going to be down on because of the for obvious reasons there. I'm rooting for him to overcome that, but that doesn't mean I'm going to root for the Steelers to draft him. Right?
Yeah. The odds of a 3rd round quarterback in general hitting are very low, much less a 3rd round quarterback with serious long-term medical concerns. I'll pass.
Man, if you could kind of combine like 3 or 4 of these quarterbacks in this draft class into one, you'd have a hell of a quarterback, I think. Because I think Carson Strong does a great job of understanding and reading defenses. He's the best air raid quarterback in this class. Not that there's many of them, but he is that. No, it's just, man, that it hurts to watch him have to move out of the pocket, man. It really does hurt.
If only these quarterbacks could touch hands or fuse, perhaps, then you'd have a good quarterback.
All right, you got me there. Derek Deese. I like Derek Deese out of San Jose State. I just he's more one of those newfangled kind of move, I think, tight end. So you better have a pretty good plan for him overall. I don't know. Have you watched anything of Josh Rivas, the guard out of Kansas State? I haven't.
No, nothing.
And I know a little bit about Zach Tom out of Wake Forest.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know if you were saying Zach Tom versus Zach Tom. Yeah, he's a really athletic tackle, kind of similar, I think, some Charles Cross comps, but a little undersized. And so some people want to kick him inside, probably even center, kind of like what I think Cody Whitehair did several years back. So I know Devin Jackson, he could talk your ear off about Zach Tom. He's a big fan of him. And so that's a guy that's might prove to be one of the better sleepers of this class.
All right. Of these players in this mock draft, Alex, who could you most see being drafted by the Steelers. His list once again includes Chris Olave, Jalen Petrie, Carson Strong, Zach Tom, Derek Deese Jr., Josh Rivas, and Sincere McCormick.
I have trouble trying to find what name is above the rest in terms of the reality of it. I think Petrie is a great fit, but he's kind of in that floaty, won't be in consideration for 20. Don't think he'll be there for 52, but I'm not sure what other name I'd put on this list. I might go Petrie by default based on the need and the style, which fits well. If he could somehow fall to 52 in a pretty good safety class, maybe that happens. And I think that would be a really good value and a really good pick.
I would lean to Petrie and then follow that up maybe by Zach Tom.
Okay. Yeah. That's probably how I would rank them as well.
All right, Bryce. I hope we indulged you enough there. All right, Alex, I think we've got through enough of them. Once again, as we talked on Friday, we weren't sure how much we would have to talk about on this Monday. And thank God Alex put together a mock draft to help kill some of that time there. So we will be back on Wednesday and see what happens between now and then. Heck, I mean, I don't know if we should promise a show on Wednesday right now, as slow as things are moving right now. If there's enough to talk about, we will have a show on Wednesday. If there is not, then we won't, and we will definitely have one on Friday at that point. But in the meantime, live stream on the YouTube machine later tonight. You can just search YouTube for Alex Kozora and get to the channel that way. I'll try to get Alex to post up maybe a reminder on Facebook and on the Twitter machine as well too. So like to try to hit maybe 200 people in that room tonight, and you can ask all your questions on there, and we'll get after it that way there. And that gets started at 7 Eastern time, correct, Alex? And it runs for right at an hour.
Yes, I'll get the time correct this time. 7 p.m.
Right.
Eastern time to 8 p.m. Dave and I, and come hang out with us. I'll hopefully talk better. It's I got allergies and it's cold. I somehow have allergies and it's cold in Pittsburgh today, and so it's been a rough morning. I'm sure you guys all will feel very bad for me.
All right, nothing new on the dating front. Anything to report there?
No, all quiet there. I don't know if I should even let you know if it changes, because I'm afraid of what someone's going to scare whatever poor woman talks to me off.
Help me help you.
How do I best do that? By not telling you things.
All right. We will get, like I said, we'll talk to you either on Wednesday or Friday. So you can follow me on the Twitter machine at Steelers Depot. You can follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. You can donate to the show by going to SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Also, if you'd like an ad-free version of the site, go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button up right navigational bar. For $25, you can have an ad-free version of the site. So thank you for listening, everybody. And as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.